I talked about how ownership is described. Right? How do you protect the ownership? Okay. How do you, or going back to, how do you authenticate that yes, right, this gentleman is Satoshi? Okay. So think about the mail. How many of you are you any of you familiar with the technology behind digital signatures? Right. So that is what exactly has been used here. Nothing very different from that, but how it has been used here and applied here is pretty innovative, right? So for others, very quickly, the concept of a private key and public key is what it is, right? So to make it simple, imagine a mailbox, right? I live at 17 Linvale Lane, Bridgewater. Okay. If you send something to me, okay, and my mailbox is locked, right? That 17 Linvale Lane, Bridgewater, New Jersey is the public key, right? And I have the key to the lock, which is my private key. So you can send any information to me, but I'm the only one who can make meaning out of that information, or I can access that information, right? And if you have to authenticate that, yes, it is indeed me, you send me the information, right? And if I acknowledge that I've received the information, that verifies that yes, I am who I claim to be, right? Then how do then when it comes to authorization, right? And if I have used my private key to encrypt the message, right? You all have the public key, okay? You can use that public key, right, on my message, and if you are able to decode it, right, that means yes, you know this key was for 17 Linvale Lane, and it was able to decode the message coming from me, right? That means the message that has been sent by me, right? So those are some of the underlying principles of digital signatures. I'll not go into too many details here, but that's what happens, right, when we sign contracts digitally. Those are the technologies that go behind the scenes. That's how the identification, authorization, authentication happens. Okay. So now we come to the concept of blocks. Right? The data is stored in blocks, right? And I'll come to that in probably 1 minute or so. What is a block, right? And how is the data stored? Okay. All those blocks are put together, right, in something called a ledger. Okay. The ledger is made available publicly to every member on the blockchain. Okay. What is the transaction? What is the data we are talking about? We are talking about the series of transactions that we discussed, right? That is the transaction data we are talking about. So, and basically, the entire ledger is made available to everybody. So everybody knows there is a transaction that happened between us, but what kind of transaction, right, is not known. Okay, so there is a little bit of transparency, but there is a significant amount of privacy also there. Yeah, transaction has happened, but what is the nature of the transaction is not made known. Okay, so the transaction is stored in a series of blocks, and all those things come together as a ledger. That ledger is made available to all, right? And then we'll talk about the concept of how new transactions are added to the ledger. You cannot change practically without a heavy cost to it. You cannot change the data that has already been added once. Okay. So then you add new transaction. As you add new transaction, right, there is a possibility that he sells the pen to me, and before this transaction reaches to all the members, he has also sold the pen to her. Okay, and she has not yet received the transaction in the copy of the ledger that reaches her, right? Then you get an updated version of the ledger from me, that is my computer, as well as from her computer. How do you decide which one is the right one, right? Because you are getting both of them independently, okay? And based on, so there is an algorithm that has been built in, which will so nobody is there to say, this was at 251, this was at 252, so 251 should have been right. There's nobody to decide that, right? And the information is being spread, the ledger is being spread in a very ad hoc manner. Right? So how does the system decide which is the right one? So those are the things we'll be very quickly covering.
So where does the token comes into this flow?
Much later. Okay. And it is when the fees has to be paid for all this effort. Okay, so this is a very simple version of what exactly is a block, right? The transaction data is here. Okay, series of transactions, they come together, right? So the transaction data is here, that has to do with, say, pen and money getting exchanged. Now, there is something called a hash reference. I won't go in, so there is one more technology. This concept is called hash function. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but it's a very fascinating thing. It's a small piece of program, and it has been there for many years, right? Irrespective of the kind and the size of the input data, it produces an output which is typically of a fixed size. All right, it can only work one way, right? So if so it is to verify that if yes, the input that has led to this output from one source, right? And if it is coming from the second source and also you have the same output, that means the data has not been tampered with. Okay, it is just to validate that. There is no other significance of it as far as blockchain is concerned. So there are specific links that are created. So this this R4 is called a hash reference. It points to this cell, right, or this block, which has, I won't use the word block just for to maintain the integrity of semantics, to this transaction data. And likewise, the multiple transactions and their references are clubbed together, right? And overall, there is a parent reference, right, which basically has these references coming all the way to the transactions. Okay, if anybody from behind the scenes tampers with any of these hash references, right, there is evidence that yes, this data has been tampered. Or if you're calling this as the transaction between Madhav and me, but this is pointing to some other transaction, it means the integrity has been compromised, right? The hash technology that I talked about is what comes into play to make sure that all these references are intact. And if we are calling this block, right, what it is, right, it has not been tampered with. Typically, a block has a series of transactions and these hash references. So that is probably denoted by R34. What you also have is a block header which points to another block. All right. So likewise, you have a series of blocks, right, which keep getting added as you keep on adding more and more transactions. All right. And with passage of time, you develop a blockchain, right? And so you see the first block, you see the second block, and so on and so forth. Imagine, right, and when, by the way, when this information is sent to all the computers, they don't go in as a blockchain as a whole, right? This block may be one set of data, this may be another set of data, it may reach in different orders, but just like a book, right? If I receive a book which is not bound, but different pages come to me in different order, it is possible, because the page numbers are there, it is possible for me to put the book together. As the receiving computers, right, they receive all these blocks, they are able to put them together and reconstruct the blockchain and see the series in which the transactions took place or the order in which the transactions arrived, right? So essentially, this is where the data resides, and the blocks are constructed in this manner, and that's why it is called a blockchain. So give me a few more minutes. Allow me to just finish this quickly.
Yeah, until he says the question open, let's let him speak. Okay.
Okay, so any change, as I described earlier, any change to the following will compromise the block: content of the transaction data, reference to that location, or the block header reference. By the way, this is this is an inverted tree. If you look at from here, here, and here, in a way, right, and it's an inverted tree. That's called this is called the Merkle root that we see out there. Okay, any change to the following will compromise the block: content of the transaction data, reference to that location, or the parent reference that I talked about. And these are blocks that in a way are concatenated, right? Why it is such a pain, why is it so immutable? We'll quickly cover that in the next one. So before I go into the technical description, maybe let's take another example out there. Maybe I want to declare to the world that I am a descendant of Mahatma Gandhi. Right? If that has to be done, right, it's not physically impossible, right? But I have to go back to 1868, right, from the time Gandhi was born to the time he got married, and from there, right, identify all the possible traces, right, and everywhere introduce, right, some concept of one of my ancestors, whether at that level, one generation later, somewhere, right, and I have to erase all other records of my existence otherwise, or right. It is physically possible, but it's a huge task, right? There are too many traces out there, right, and too many places for me to literally. It's next to impossible, though it's not impossible that way, right? The same concept can be applied to this. To your point, yes, one can go back and change, right? But the system has been designed in such a manner that changing it, right, has been made as burdensome as changing the family history. Okay, and so basically what it has been done is making, and so even adding a new block is expensive, but that's still a one step, right? So every new block that has to be added, there is an effort that is required. Okay, and that effort is called mining, by the way, since I'm sure you all would have seen the concept of mining, or you would have heard about it. So any addition, right, is effectively, the process is called mining. Addition, writing or rewriting data to the history has been made computationally expensive. So if I have to rewrite the data which was, I would say, transacted 10 blocks back, okay, that effort is 10 times more expensive than just adding one block. Okay, and the speed with which things happen, obviously we're talking about tens and hundreds of blocks out there, and there's more and more effort that is required, right, to change. The way it has been designed is every new block that has to be added, there is a puzzle that has to be solved by computer systems. Okay, once you're on the blockchain network, right, your computer becomes a resource to the blockchain network, all right, and because you have a client sitting on your computer, and it basically the algorithm governs, right, all those activities. So if I am on the blockchain network, my computer becomes part of the system. There is that solving of that computational puzzle that goes on, which is the process of mining, right? And if I have to change the data, I have to go back so many cycles, right? And that means more and more computational effort is required. And that computational effort means money, right? In many ways. My resource is getting wasted, energy is getting consumed, and so on. If you magnify it at a reasonable level, it is truly very, very expensive. I wouldn't go into the details of the puzzle, right? Those are hash puzzles. There is no, I would say, intelligent way of solving that puzzle. It has to be solved through simple trial and error, right? So the computers have to literally start with, okay, with number one, will it solve the puzzle? Number two, will it solve that puzzle? And they have to, depending upon the difficulty level we set up, there are again algorithms that are out there that set up the difficulty level of the puzzle. The effort has to go in proportion. All right,
Could you please put the cable behind your ear every time it bangs against the microphone?
Okay. I'm glad somebody's getting disturbed also. That means you're listening. Okay.
Wrap the cable the other side of your head.